Who? Oh. Well,
Started. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Business at its Best seminar on communicating virtually when face-to-face isn't an option. My name is Dawn Johnson. I am the new Vice President of Partnership Services here at the Bowling Green Area Chamber of Commerce. Been here as of today, 6 weeks. So I've been in Bowling Green. I moved from Michigan, where I had 19 years experience with the Muskegon, Michigan Lakeshore Chamber of Commerce, and am very excited to be here in Bowling Green, and I will be even more excited when I can meet most of you virtually. I mean, in person, not virtually. So this new normal, I'm anticipating and excited to hear what we'll be talking about in just a minute. But I did want to talk about a few housekeeping rules. Today's session is being recorded, so please keep your mics on mute for the duration of the presentation. If you have questions, those can be submitted via chat. And you can see the example that Katie just submitted, and we will have a questions and answers period at the end of the presentation where we will read your submissions for Amy to answer. And before we get started, we want to show a short clip from our sponsor, Graves Gilbert Clinic. They are the title sponsor for Business at its Best. Aaron? No sound.
Aaron, you've got to unmute your mic.
Hold on a moment. We have obviously a technicality going on here, so be just a second.
Aaron, if you want to cancel your screenshot, I've got it.
Graves Gilbert Clinic, their top priority is the health and safety of their patients, employees, and visitors. And because of that, Graves Gilbert Clinic is now offering telehealth visits, which allows patients and physicians to use an app to communicate via video chat. Any patient who would like to schedule a telehealth appointment is encouraged to call their Graves Gilbert Clinic physician's office directly, or call the Graves Gilbert Clinic telehealth hotline at 270-746-5790.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. We appreciate you working out that technology glitch. It is my pleasure today to introduce Amy Tylicki. Amy is a certified trainer with the American Society for Training and Development. Amy has worked with WKU's Career and Workforce Development since 2001, providing employee training programs for numerous businesses and industries throughout the region. In her time with WKU, Amy develops and delivers a wide range of courses, including communications, writing, customer service, leadership, and team development. Amy has earned a master's degree in English from WKU and has taught composition and literature at WKU, Elizabethtown Community College, and Jackson State Community College. Also with us today is Kara Neidl. Kara is the coordinator for Career and Workforce Development, CWD, at WKU. CWD is dedicated to being a key partner in lifelong learning and bringing career and workforce training to business and industry within our region. Whether it's meeting the needs of each employee, individual learning classes, or extensive certificate programs, WKU CWD can customize and meet those needs. Amy and Kara, we so much appreciate you being here with us today and partnering with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Chamber, for inviting us to be here and partner with you during, we've heard it said 1,000 times, these unprecedented times. And so really appreciate the opportunity to come and share with you guys today. Want to make sure, Kara, that you all can see my PowerPoint.
Not yet, Amy.
Not yet. Okay, hang on 1 second. Here is a little secret for everyone. This is my very first webinar. So we're all in this together. We keep hearing that as well, with kind of some new things and learning some new technologies. And I am right there in that boat with you guys. So hopefully you can see that now.
Yes, and if you make it full slide or go into presentation mode, it'll take.
Absolutely, certainly will. Like that.
There you go.
Yep. Looking okay? All right. Kara, before I begin, I want to make sure, is there anything housekeeping that you needed to add regarding chat and all of that? I know that that was addressed earlier, but anything that you wanted to add, since you are our moderator here and you're the one that's going to be getting all these things?
Sure. No, just if you have any questions throughout, you can submit them in the chat function, and we will resume those at the end of the presentation. And there will be a couple of polls throughout the presentation as well that you can answer.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Kara. And those are coming right up. So before we get into that, though, just the objectives. And I know that when you saw this class offered, you saw what we would be covering here today. But just to go back over that, we're going to go over the 4 components to enhance virtual communications. And I'll let you know that this can enhance communications even when we're back face-to-face, but as we are kind of finding ourselves in different workspaces now and having to communicate, certainly things that are pinpointed towards that, but that will help us in communication in general. Next, we will have some tools to begin looking at choosing the appropriate communication method for the situation. Everything does not warrant a Zoom meeting, contrary to what some folks seem to think here in the last couple of months as we've been working more from home. But sometimes an email will suffice, sometimes a phone call is what's needed, and so we will be looking at that and kind of pinpointing the criteria that will help us to decide which communication is going to be best for the situation that we're dealing with. And then as we begin to break apart those different communication methods that we are called upon to use, some tips for each of those and then what to avoid. So those are our objectives as we walk through today's training. But we're going to start out, and here's our first poll question you're going to see coming right up there. Have you been working exclusively from home during the pandemic? So in the last couple months or so, have you been exclusively from home? Yes or no? You're just going to answer that question there in the chat. And so I know that most of us have been, although I know that there are some that are still going into an office, maybe that is not, you know, doesn't have a lot of people, doesn't have a huge population. You may be still having to pop into the office some. So yes or no on that one. And then number 2, are you using methods of communication that you haven't been called upon to use prior to working more remotely and more from home? So just yes or no on each of those. And Kara is getting that feedback, and she's going to share that with us shortly. You getting any feedback yet, Kara?
Yes, so it looks like about 57% of the people on this webinar have not been working exclusively from home.
Oh, okay.
Maybe that's popping in and out. And about 43% have been working exclusively from home. And then as far as methods of communication, 86% said they are using methods of communication that they haven't had to use before.
Yes. Yeah. So we kind of all, I think, are finding ourselves. I know a lot of people previously had used platforms such as Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever, the video conferencing that really most people probably hadn't had to use before. So I'm going to dare say that that's the most popular one. That is the one, as I mentioned before, that I'm having to use for the first time myself. And so with that, of course, comes some challenges as we get used to that, and we're going to talk much more about that as we move on. So thanks for taking the time to answer those poll questions. And I'm going to move on, and I'm going to allow a little more time for this one. Again, using your chat feature. Now, this one is not a yes or no, but we've all indicated that, definitely our workplace looks different. Even if we are not working exclusively from home, work looks vastly different than it has in the past for us. And so because of that, then we are having to use those different methods of communicating, perhaps that we have not used in the past. So in the chat feature, this is just one word. Give me an adjective. Type one word that describes your experience communicating virtually. And as I said, I'll give you a few moments to jot that down, to chat that, so that Kara can receive those. And I will share from my perspective, the one word to describe my new experience communicating virtually is awkward. I think folks, even sitting right here right now in my office at home, feels very awkward. I'm used to being in front of a group of people, and we're training, and I'm up and I move around a lot, and I'm not seeing my face staring back at me on a screen, and so that feels very awkward to me. So that's one word that I would use to describe at least my perception of our new communication experience here. So I'll give you a few more seconds to chime in there with just your one word or two of description.
Well, Amy, we have quite a few good ones coming through.
Good.
A lot of across the board too. We have a very good experience, foreign, challenging, unconnected,
yes,
patient, different, trash, busier, trial and error, and then tedious.
Yeah. And it's all of those things. I was talking to my daughter's 21, and so I asked her this question because she had to finish up her college semester like everybody else, virtually and online, and had Zoom lectures and Zoom presentations that she had to make. And hers, all of the things that I listed, and I hear from you all too, were kind of on the negative, but then you do hear those positives. For her, she said it was handy and it was simple. For her, that was something that she welcomed more so than maybe standing in front of a classroom and having to give a presentation. It was easier for her to do that via video conferencing like we're doing here. So yeah, it runs the gamut, and I appreciate your all's feedback with that, because it is both positive and negative, and it is certainly, somebody used that descriptor, different. And because it is different, it does take a lot of kind of trial and error. But I know, as Dawn mentioned, even in the introduction, even when this is over and we're slowly going back to more of our face-to-face real world, I think that we're going to find that the repercussions of having gone through this experience is that we're going to find ourselves leaning still on these things that we've been leaning on here as we've been working remotely, even in our new work places, even when we do get back to more face-to-face stuff. So thank you all again for that input. And so with that, we'll just move along and start talking a little bit about our content here. So I know that in her introduction for me, Dawn indicated I've been working as a trainer with WKU and CWD for almost 20 years. I'm working towards, I'm about 19 and a half years into it right now. And so in those many years that I have been training throughout the region and beyond, I've worked with a lot of organizations doing a lot of different things: service organizations, medical folks, hospitals, manufacturing. So I've run the gamut with the types of organizations that I have worked with over the years. And when I go to train and we begin to put together training for client needs, one of the questions, of course, we ask is, what's your biggest challenge with your teams, with you all getting things accomplished and being productive? What is your number one challenge? And far and away, And no matter what anybody does, it's communication, right? So communication, and that's even when we're in the real world, face to face, communication is just a challenge. It just is. It's just the nature of it. But just to begin here, it looks, if you can see my screen there on the PowerPoint, if we just look at the definition of communication, it's very simple. It's just the process of transferring information from one entity to another. And it's a very simple three-part process, really. You've got a sender. You got that person has some information that they're wanting to share, whether that's verbally, face-to-face, or if that's a phone call or an email or whatever. And then you've got a receiver, and that receiver picks up what that person is laying down, so to speak. So very simple, one would think. Why is communication so difficult? Well, check out this very busy slide that takes those three components that we just looked at. And there's a lot of things that go into each one of those three components that we have to have in order for communication to take place. So if you look here, we talked about that person that is the sender, right? The sender of the message, no matter what that message is, that person has a lot of filters. They have a lot of things, a lot of lenses that communication has to work through, such as your age, right? So how old you are, your ethnicity and race, your culture, where you were brought up, your gender. You've probably noticed that men and women communicate vastly different in vastly different ways. Your personality preference, right? So what your personality looks like, that determines your communication style. And you can see there, I mean, the list goes on, and that's not even exhaustive what you're seeing there on the screen. And then you have that actual message. So that person has all these filters that they are assigning and are influencing the way that they're communicating. And then we go into that second part, which is the message delivery, if you look down below. And that is the message itself. Is it clear, right? Am I being as clear and specific as I can be? Is it organized? Is it of interest to me? Is it going to be of interest to the person who's going to be receiving the message? And then you've got the motive of communication. So is it a phone call? Is it an email? Is it a text? Is it a letter? Is it a face-to-face communication? Is a meeting, whatever? So you have that, and there's all those kind of subcomponents to that. And then you go over to the right-hand side of the screen, and you have the receiver of that message. So that receiver of that message has the same filters, although they look different. We have all those same filters that we've got to receive that message through, such as my age. So you talk about age, and we've all heard all of our lives about the generation gap, right, and the communication. And I have teenagers and older now, but I don't know about you all, but they have a whole other language that I didn't learn growing up. And so I've learned as I've been raising these kids, they have different words for things. Perhaps your teenager has told you that you need to be more woke. I don't know if you know what that means, but that just means you need to be more aware. So that's what I'm talking about here, is that we've just got these different filters, and they've got different filters too. So therein lies the challenge of communication, just in a nutshell, is that we've all got different perceptions of things. And so you may not then pick up what I'm laying down, so to speak, if I am not trying to reach you based upon kind of all of these different things that I know about you. So that's what makes communication so difficult. And now you take us away from being face-to-face, and then we're just kind of adding more things to kind of get through in order to be able to effectively communicate. So what this looks like, and perhaps you've seen this statistic if you've not before, it's a pretty eye-opening one. And so this is based on the research of Dr. Albert Moravian, communication specialist, who says that anytime we are communicating, when we are communicating with people, people are going to assign meaning based on not just what you say. So if you look at the pie graph there, he says that only 7% of communication hinges on word denotation. So in other words, the dictionary meaning of a word is only 7%. In fact, he then argues that the rest of the model there, body language, which is makes up a portion of your nonverbal. So this is how we look. When we are delivering a message, that has everything to do with facial expression, how you use space. You know, do I look confident? Am I slumped over? Do I look nervous? Am I making eye contact? All of those things are part of that 55%. And so we assign notice the most meaning to how someone looks, how they appear when they're delivering our message. And then that blue portion over there, also a subcomponent of nonverbal, is tone of voice. And so this just simply refers to how one sounds when they're delivering that message. So that's how loudly I'm speaking. Am I speaking with a sincere tone? Am I saying it in a sarcastic way? All of these things are making up that 38% of how it sounds coming across. So, you know, you may look at this, and I know that the first time that I ever saw the statistic, I was shocked. I was like, that can't be. How can it be that your word choice, you know, doesn't only has 7% of meaning? But we do it all the time. So I always use as an example, if you've ever trained somebody is brand new on the job, and you know, you're trying to train them on how to do a task. And of course, when somebody comes to do a job, they are nervous. It's their first day and they're having to learn a lot of things very quickly. And you say to them, you know, you load them up with this information and say, do you understand? And they go, yeah, I get it. Right. So my words say, yes, I get it. But then this kind of worried, you know, deer in the headlights look that this person's given me with their facial expression, and then kind of that nervous tone of voice is telling me something vastly different. So the true meaning, then, he would argue, is in the nonverbal, which is that 93% that encompasses both body language and tone of voice. And so I bring this up because then we can understand then when we're working from home, and this has been kind of probably the catalyst for all of these Zoom calls and video conferencing that we're doing, is because we can gain the most meaning when we do have those nonverbals. And so if I'm video conferencing, then I can see facial expressions, not as great as you can in person, but I can still see some indications of understanding or not understanding, or agreement or non-agreement. And certainly I can hear tone of voice. And so I think that's why we've seen a big push for these things, since we can't meet face to face. All right, so now let's we're going to look at those 4 components that is going to help us to enhance these virtual communications that we find ourselves being dependent upon during this time from working more remotely. First of all, and as I mentioned before, even in the objective portion there as I introduce this, these things are surely crucial for virtual communications, but I'm going to argue that it's for any communications, even when we're talking face-to-face and back in kind of a more normal existence, these things apply as well. But first of all, we need to consider our purpose and audience. Of course, we're going to break all these down in just a moment, in all of our communications being as clear and concise as we possibly can be. Staying in step with one another and being proactive about doing that when we are, you know, not meeting at the office and are working more remotely. And then from all of these things, being able to effectively match our technology to the communication situation that we are addressing at that moment. So the first one, consider purpose and audience. And this goes anytime, right? So anytime I'm going to sit down and write an email or text or make a phone call or have a meeting or whatever, you always want to consider, what's the purpose of this communication? Why do I need to communicate this information right here, right now to this person, right? So what's the purpose? Am I trying to just inform somebody of something? Are we trying to come to some sort of agreement? Is there something that we need to make a decision about? Why am I communicating right now? And then what do I want this audience or this person or people, what do I want them to do with this communication? Again, is it just informative? I'm just informing them of something and it doesn't require a response. Do I need them to give me a response of some sort? So what are my expectations of what this person should do with this information when I do communicate it to them? Secondly, so again, looking more closely at that audience, that person or people that you're trying to reach. If you go back and think about that model, you know, we've got all those filters we've got to get through in order to reach that person or those people. But, you know, what's their communication style? How do they prefer to communicate? What's their pace? Do they like to do things? And everybody's different, you know, and the more you work with somebody, the more you know which maybe communication mode they prefer. Some people prefer a text. Some people would be, you know, stressed out if you send them a text. They would prefer a phone call. So what's their pace? What's their knowledge level? Where are they? Because anytime we're communicating, that's one of the most important things to ask yourself is, what does this person know already, and what do they need to know? Because we want to meet that person or those people where they are. In other words, you don't want to be talking over somebody's head, but you certainly don't want to be talking down to them like they are, you know, are an idiot and don't know anything. So you're just gauging what that person's knowledge level is. How much information do they need? Again, people, and that's kind of going into my next point, but people want you to be clear and concise. So I don't need to tell you everything. This one makes me think of, I don't know, I look up a lot of recipes online, especially now. I've been trying to be more creative with cooking, since we've done a lot more eating at home than typical. But anytime you go to a recipe, I'll look up a recipe, and 9 times out of 10, you've got a whole big blog about somebody's grandmama's biscuits or whatever recipe I've looked up. And, you know, you can jump right down to that recipe, which I always do, because, you know, as much as I appreciate your grandma and whatever it took for her to come up with that recipe, I don't need that entire narrative about how you arrived at putting this online. So I don't need to know everything. Just tell me that recipe, in other words. So how much information do they need? What is the chance of misunderstanding? Is we're going to find out. This is going to be a big key component of determining the type of technology that we use, or the mode or method of communication that we use. What's the chance of misunderstanding? Because we know if we have taken away, if we're using just text only, that's 7%. So what's the chance of misunderstanding? Is this a delicate subject? If there is a huge chance of misunderstanding, then the closer we get to that face-to-face where we've got that whole 100%, then the better off we're going to be. And then finally, what's the relationship like with this person? Again, another one of the criteria that we're going to be looking at to determine which method of communication is the best for that situation. Do we have a good working relationship? You know, I can text Kara. Kara and I've worked together now for several years. We know each other. We're very friendly with one another, and, you know, I'm sure she feels the same way, that she can shoot me a text, right? And there's not going to be a whole lot of misunderstanding because we work together so closely all the time. So if you've got that good working relationship, then, you know, you probably can back off from some of that more, having to get that whole or more of that nonverbal in there. But what's the relationship like? And that's going to help us to determine which method we need to use. But always, and this kind of goes into my second component here, second point, people want you to be clear and concise, right? We want to know what that message, what is this? What do I need to do with it? And so communication is always going to be more successful if it matches the audience expectations. And it doesn't matter who your audience is. I would assert that any audience wants you to get to the point. What I need to do with this? We live busy lives. We get inundated with emails and phone calls and now Zoom meetings. What do I need to do? Get to the point, tell me what I need to know, and then let me move on, because I probably have another email or another Zoom meeting that I need to attend. And then keep that message as simple as possible. So no matter who your audience is, you can rest assured that these are the expectations, these are the things that people are going to appreciate about your communication, whatever type of communication you're using. So getting to the point, that's just your content. We want to include we want to include enough information for people to be able to do something with that message. And considering your audience is going to help you, again, what do they know? What do they need to know? How do I meet that audience where they are? But in other words, just kind of in a nutshell here, your goal is to include enough information so that people stay engaged and you have their interest and you tell them what they need to know, but not so much information that you waste their time and they don't even know what you were trying to tell them in the first place because you obscured that main point by, you know, going overboard with information overload. So just enough to cover everything, but short enough to be interesting. I always think about a professor that I had at WKU when we asked her the inevitable question that every student asks when you're assigned a paper, how long does it need to be? And she said, the length of a woman's skirt. Long enough to cover everything, but short enough to keep it interesting. So there you go. That's how you want your message to be. Cover everything, but don't get lost in it. Don't lose us in it. Keep our interest. All right. So then the next thing, the next component to enhancing our virtual communication, and this is something that I think we have to work towards since we are not in the office together, or we're not in the workplace together. We have to really be proactive, I think, about staying in step with one another. So prioritize keeping everyone in the loop through regular communication with the team, whatever that looks like to you guys. And it's going to look different for different teams and different situations, but that we are, if you had a weekly meeting, then we probably need to keep up with that weekly meeting. Kara, I know you guys in the office have one. You all have a weekly meeting, and you guys have kept that up just to kind of, no, we're not in the office together, but, here's kind of where we are. Here's what I've been doing. Just kind of checking in with one another. And so secondly, then proactively share information regarding your situation, your demands, and your priorities. And so again, I think that this one is very important in the situation that we're finding ourselves in, because I've heard it said, we've heard all of the adages, and these will go on and on, I think, and live way beyond all of us. We're all in this together. We've heard that, or we're all in the same boat. But I heard somebody saying, I thought it was very poignant and true. We're not all in the same boat here. We're in the same storm. We're all living through the same storm with this pandemic, but our boats look very different. My boat's pretty calm over here. My kids are 18 and 21, and I didn't have to, crack a whip and keep them getting their assignments in and everything as school was winding down. But I know that's not the case for everybody. Some of you all have been working full-time from home and had, several kids that you had to manage and get their schoolwork in. And so the situations are different. We got to be transparent, I think, with our teams that, here's, I've been working, but I've also been doing this. And so kind of just sharing that information and keeping everybody in step there. Acknowledge receipt of important messages, even if immediate action isn't possible, right? So we're not in the office there together with your teams. And so sometimes you might need something and you shoot off an email or you send a text or whatever. Even if I can't do anything with that, just let people know, hey, I got that text. I'm waiting on Bill over here to give me more information before I answer you fully, but just acknowledging that you have received that information. Seek clarification to better understand everybody's behaviors or intentions before jumping to conclusions. Again, we're not there together. And so when we don't have that nice big 93% of nonverbal, it's very easy to, I think, jump to conclusions and intentions. So just make sure, and I think you have to be proactive about that, right? So making that phone call and going, did I understand this right? Did I read this right? Did I hear you right? Or this is what I heard. So practicing that active listening becomes really paramount in our situations here as we're working more separately. All right. So then from that, then our final component of enhancing communication is we want to match the technology, and we know now that we have a lot of different ways to communicate when we can't do it face to face, but it's very important that we match the technology to the communication situation, whatever that is. So again, go back to your purpose and audience, your very first portion that we looked at. That should determine your delivery mechanism. All right, so this should determine everything does not have to be a Zoom meeting. Everything doesn't have to be a phone call. We have to figure out, take a look, think about your purpose, your audience, all those things that we've been talking about, and figure out what's going to best match that situation. So carefully consider your goals. And so your leaner text-based work, such as a text on the phone or an email, those are going to work best if you're just pushing information in one direction, right? So those are things like when you're just circulating routine information, not asking any questions, you're just sharing an idea perhaps, or collecting simple data. And so here's everybody's seen some form or another, I think, of this meme. But you see the ladies there saying, "You were not in that meeting," and the cat says, "Well, it should have been an email." And many times it should have just been an email, because we know that an email is not going to take you near as much time as an hour-long video conference might. Okay, but then if we do, there are times that video conferencing or even a phone call is going to be preferable, because that's going to go back and think about our pie graph. With those two types of technology, then we do get more of that. We're getting closer to that 100%. We're not just dependent upon that 7%, but it's going to be richer and more interactive, because I do have, if I'm using video conferencing, then I can see some body language. I can see some facial expressions. Phone call, even, I can hear tone of voice. So things like problem solving, negotiations, trying to make a decision as a team, those things are going to probably be better served to have more of that nonverbal, so a phone call or video conferencing. I don't know if you've ever tried to make a decision via email with 15 people, but it's like herding some cats, and it winds up wasting a lot of time. So just match that technology to whatever the communication is that you're trying to do. So in other words, just kind of a rule of thumb is, the more complex the task, the closer you should be to that in-person communication, so that video conferencing or even a phone call. All right, so here's just very quickly, I'll shoot this up here and show you, because not only do we want to think about how complex the task is, but as we talked about before when we were thinking about our audience and purpose, think about who am I trying to reach, and what's the chance of misunderstanding? Is this a delicate subject? And what's the relationship risk? Right? So how well do I know this person? And so you'll see here, if there's not much chance of misunderstanding, and we have a pretty good working relationship, we know each other pretty well, then I probably can text you or email you, because I'm not going to be as dependent upon that 93% of that other nonverbals that's going to help me to understand that message. But notice, as the chance of misunderstanding goes up, we want to get closer to what would be that face-to-face in person, which I know that we're not able to do now, but hopefully we'll be able to do before too long. And so, of course, video conferencing is going to get you closer to that. Phone conversation is going to get you even closer than just a text or an email. If the relationship risk is high, if I don't know you very well, I don't know, we talked about knowing that audience and kind of what their filters are. If we don't know that, then I may want to err towards that side of using more of the nonverbals if possible. So just again, thinking about those are your criteria: relationship risk, chance of misunderstanding, and then how complex is this information that we're trying to work with here? Is it just one way, or is it going to be more collaborative? All right, so let's we'll begin to wrap up and look at some tips for each of these different methods of communication. So email etiquette, it's important. And again, even we email all the time. I know we're doing that even before all of this set in and we were working more from home. But email etiquette is very important, because if you go back and think about our percentages, when we have email, we're using text only, then we are very dependent upon the denotation of the word and word choice. And so it's as we all interact with the printed word as though it has a personality, because we don't have that person's personality there in front of us, but we begin to make some assumptions, and we kind of assign a personality to it when we're reading someone's email. So we don't have that immediate feedback. I can't, if I send you an email, I can't see your face when you're reading it. And so if I send something that's very cloudy and obscure, I can't see that puzzled look on your face where I can further explain things. So we have to then assume that things are going to be much easier misinterpreted. It's going to be much easier to misinterpret something when it's just text or written word like that. So if we follow the basic rules of etiquette, then we are going to up our chances then, I think, of understanding. So tips to include that clarity. Before you shoot off your messages, review especially very important messages before sending them to make sure that you have struck the right tone, because again, all we have here is just simply our word choice to create tone. We don't have that other 93%. A good way to do this, if you have somebody at home that you can go, hey, this is incredibly important and I want to make sure that this is coming across the way that I intend it to, just read this and what questions do you have? If you can get somebody else to put another set of eyes on it, that can be helpful if you have someone there at home, a spouse or, an older child or whatever to be able to read that. Go out of your way to emphasize important information, highlighting the parts of the message that require attention, because again, we get inundated with email and a lot of times we're just skimming. So if it's incredibly important, then it's your job to emphasize that, whether that's using bold or, some way that you are highlighting that for the reader. If you are asking for a response, then your chances of actually getting a response, particularly if you got a lengthy email, is then to put response requested in that subject line, because that's the first thing. If you wait until, you got a 5-paragraph email and you wait until the very last sentence, please respond with your thoughts on this. I don't know, that there's going to be a large percentage that probably didn't make it all the way down there. So put that in your subject line. Separate several requests into multiple emails. If you've got several things that are of importance, you probably want to separate that out so that you increase that prominence and you are then communicating that these are separate things and very important things, and all of these things need to be taken care of. Err on the side of positivity with your word choice to mitigate the tendency toward negative interpretation. And I've read several studies that anytime we write, it's just the nature of how we receive that information. We're kind of looking at that more negatively just from the beginning. So we have to work very hard to err on that side of positivity as we are using text. So how do you create tone in text and email? Well, we want to try to write in a positive tone. And so what I mean by that is, an example would be, you would want to say something like, when you complete the report versus if you complete the report. So you see the difference in the two ways that you have expressed that. The first one I'm assuming good intention on your part that you're going to get that done, not if you get it done, I know how you are. So that's just creating a positive tone. Same message, but you've changed the tone of that just in your word choice there. Avoid negative words that begin with the prefixes un, non-ex, things like that, or the suffix less, such as useless, ex-employee, non-existent. And use contractions to add a friendly tone, such as don't, won't, or can't versus do not, will not, cannot. And so most of us growing up, at least in my generation, we were taught not to use contractions, but in business writing, we want to try to have a conversational tone. And so we are certainly allowed to do that. All right, so a couple more tips here. With email, try to keep that email brief, one screen length. We've all gotten those emails that go on, and you have to scroll and scroll and scroll, and you probably have lost them. We are not being, go back to our second component that we looked at. We're probably not getting to the point, and we're probably not being clear, so try to keep it as brief as possible. The expectation for most folks is that an email will be responded to, or that if I get an email that I'm going to respond to it within 24 hours, if not sooner. Check for your punctuation, spelling, and grammatical errors. This becomes paramount as well because people are going to judge you on that. They don't have you right there in front of them. If I'm speaking to someone, they're probably, not judging me as harshly on my grammar as if it's printed and written. So make sure that you're checking for those things because you will be judged on it. Use caps when appropriate. So if you are trying to emphasize something, that's okay. Don't use all caps. We all know that denotes that you're shouting at me. So only use caps when you intend to be yelling at me in the email. Most of the time we're not doing that. Use a font that has a professional or neutral look. Not one that's all swirly and pink. That's fine if you want to send that to your, to your personal friends, but if we are talking about business communication, then we want one that's easily read, right? So very readable, visually readable, and is more neutral. All right, and so we have to know that there are times when email is just not going to work for us. If it's something, if we're maybe working through a problem, or if we are discussing something delicate, then probably want to at least take that to a phone call. We may even want to take that to a video conference. We want to get that, again, as close as you can to that face-to-face if we are, particularly if we're getting nowhere with that email. And so, things become heated. We know that. We don't have that nonverbal in there. A lot of misunderstanding can occur back and forth. So again, if you're dealing with something delicate, certainly confidential, then the closer we can get to face-to-face, the more successful we're going to be. All right, so I know texting has become very much an accepted method of communication when it comes to professional and business communication. And so just some tips for that. Text only when you have an established business relationship. So don't go, right out of the gate, you got somebody's number from someone and text them. I would say don't text until you've had at least a phone conversation with someone. So text only when you have that established business relationship. Pay attention to timing. The thing about texting, which is a great thing, is that it's immediate. But pay attention to timing. So just as you would not probably make a professional phone call at midnight, you don't want to send a text at midnight. Kara does not want me to send her a text at midnight about some great new training that just occurred to me. So just consider that timing, keep it within our work hours, those accepted. Know when to make a call. How do you know when to make a call? Well, again, we've talked about some ways to determine your best method of communication. But if I find myself, and I do this all the time, if I find myself typing up a text on my phone and it keeps going and it looks like I'm writing, a short novel, I got to go, okay, hang on. I probably just need to phone this in. I need to call this in because this is probably much more detailed and intricate that is maybe not going to, it maybe has more chance of being misinterpreted if I'm just sending a text. So know when to make that call. Keep it brief. So that kind of goes along with that. Nobody wants to have to read a text that looks like a chapter in a book. Remain professional with your professional, when we are doing business texting. So that probably means, don't send the poop emoji to your boss or some other emoji that is not professional. Reply promptly, okay? Because again, the nature of texting, the expectation is that it is immediate, right? So if you send a text, we talked about email being 24 hours. 24 hours to respond to a text is probably not acceptable. It's a much more immediate method of communication. So reply promptly. But again, go back and think about what we set up here. Pay attention to timing as well. All right. So just some telephone tips when you're actually going to get on the horn and have a vocal conversation here. We want to answer within 3 rings. Be sensitive to the tone of your voice. Again, this is one big portion of, now we've got some more way to add meaning to this exchange that I'm going to have, this communication. So be incredibly sensitive to how your tone sounds as you're speaking on the phone. Speaking clearly so that we can hear what's being said. Use speakerphone only when it's necessary, because otherwise you're probably picking up a lot of background information that's going to be distracting. Actively listen and take notes as you are speaking on the phone, just so that you remember those highlights of that conversation, and be mindful of your volume. So both of my children, especially if they're in the car with me and somebody calls, they'll say, "Mom, the phone rings," and you immediately just go up like 10 decibels. It's like you think that you're, speaking on an old time telephone that's, got a crackly long distance line or something. So just be mindful of your volume. You just want to speak at the same volume that you would were you standing there face to face. All right, so we'll begin to make our way down to talking about probably what's become the most popular over the last couple of months. Method of communication. So this screen here probably looks pretty familiar to most of us at this time, but I'm going to ask for your input once again, a final time here. In that chat box, what's the funniest or most unusual thing you've seen on someone's background on a video conference in the last couple of months? So just a word or two. If you saw them, we've seen, I've seen lots of things just kind of come across in news stories, even if you didn't specifically, if it wasn't something that you personally saw. There's been some faux pas, I think, as we've gotten used to this video conferencing platform that many of us had not used before.
Well, we have some coming through, Amy. The first one, and I think this one is very, very timely, and it is very funny, but somebody apparently used a Tiger King background. We have a couple people said Star Wars, of course, children and pets, and I'm guilty of both of those in Zoom calls myself. And then somebody said, I guess somebody must have worn a gas mask.
Oh, okay.
I guess they're trying to protect themselves.
And those are the things that make you wonder what's going on at that house, right?
Yeah. Another one is, and I've seen this one on social media a couple times too, is a kid put their name was reconnecting so that he didn't have to participate in the call.
Oh,
Of course,
that's one way to get out the back door, right?
Yeah, toilet flushes, you know, some of those that we've all seen on social media.
Right, yeah. Some of them been comical. So, well, there's Michael Scott. There's a meme for you. When you accidentally share the wrong screen, everybody sees that you were actually looking at Facebook when you were supposed to be paying attention in a meeting. Or maybe you saw this one. This one was kind of early on as we all began working from home. There was a CEO of a company that was having a Zoom meeting and accidentally turned herself into a potato. So I guess that's her face on a potato and couldn't turn herself off. So she conducted the entire meeting as a spud. So there you go. Probably a little distracting for those attending, trying to listen to her. Thanks for sharing that. All right, so let's look at some tips then, how we can enhance those video meetings that we've really found ourselves attending a lot here in recent. First of all, dress for the job. In other words, don't wear your pajamas. Now I know we're at home and a little more relaxed, that's fine. But you know, we've probably seen those stories where somebody, you know, was dressed at the top and just had their underwear on and then was asked to stand up, and all of a sudden everybody knows that you didn't fully dress for the job. So dress for the job. State your video area. So again, just be mindful of what your background looks like. I know even as I was preparing for this one, and it's kind of off in a corner now, but I had the bookcase behind me, and I had a picture of my daughter. It was kind of an abstract that she had done of herself back in an art class back in high school, and it was very distracting though. So I was like, oh, that's really weird. I bet, you know, if I were looking at this for the first time, I'd be like, what is that? You know, so just being mindful of what your video area looks like, because people are looking at it. We know that. I mean, I've totally like looked at everybody's background. I like Kara. She's representing WKU there with all her WKU things in her home office, which is very professional and looks great. But there can be some distracting things. So just make sure that you're mindful of what your background looks like. More light is better, but don't backlight yourself, because then we can't see you. Then you just look like you have come down from heaven or something in a cloud of glory, and we can't really see you. Try to look in the camera. That one's a little difficult for me. That's a tip that I need to work on. But try to engage, because that's the whole purpose of using these video conferencing platforms, is that we can engage better. So try to look in the camera. Do a test run with your settings before you get on, and that again, just kind of running a quick trial run just to make sure that you're familiar with the technology and what you need to do, and muting yourself and unmuting yourself and all those different things. Stay on mute if you're not talking most of the time. If the moderator will usually handle this for us, I guess depending, but if you're not talking, then stay on mute, because otherwise then we're going to be kind of talking over one another, and I may be picking up your dog barking, and you're not even saying anything. Don't eat or do other distracting things during the meeting. Again, it's kind of amplified in a way, right? So now that we normally, in a typical meeting at work, we're usually sitting around a conference table or in a boardroom or whatever, and we're not looking dead on at everybody's faces. And with this video conferencing, we are. So just know that everything's kind of amplified a little bit. So don't eat, or I don't know, please don't pick your nose, or I don't know, fool with your hair or whatever, because all those things are going to be even more amplified and distracting. If you're the host of the meeting, only invite those that need to be there. And I would say, listen, just remember this, even when we're back face to face, if you call a meeting, you don't have to call everybody, just call who needs to be there. But particularly here, we have so many that we've got to attend now. Invite only those people that are critical to that. And then if you are the host, make those meetings private so that people don't crash your meetings, which I've heard lots of tales of that too, of folks, I don't know, I guess bored and just want to go in and say ugly things and disrupt a meeting. So just make those meetings private. All right. So do we want to do our Q&A next, I think, Kara?
Yes, so if people want to, if you want to use the chat function for any questions or the takeaway that Amy just put on the screen, either way, I do have a couple of questions that came through earlier in the program, so we can go ahead and so we were asked, how do you combat over communication, or those that like to CC everyone and just a lot of CYA.
Yes, yeah. And that's become, I think, really one of the #1 reasons that we are still using email as much as we are. And that's something that I think that we have to address as teams, and you know, this may be better served when we are back together. But I think if with your teams, with your working teams, if you kind of establish you know, what the expectations are. We don't have to, you know, if I am not directly impacted by this, then we don't have to CC everybody on this. Please don't, and I would just say this in general, please do not reply all. And so just kind of setting some guidelines, some team expectations about how we're going to communicate via email. No, you know, but I know that is truly an issue that we all deal with. And that's a very good question. But I think that that's something that team has to, you know, we have to kind of come to our own, come on up with our own expectations about how we're going to communicate and what's accepted and what's not.
Okay, another one, do you have like a platform that you recommend?
I'm gonna be completely transparent here, and so the first time I used Zoom was probably about 4 weeks ago. This is my very first delivering anything virtually. This is my very first time as a trainer delivering anything virtually. So I have only exclusively used Zoom. That's all I have used. I think that it seems like that is the platform du jour right now. I don't know if you all agree with that. That probably would have been a pretty good polling question that I could have posed. But what platform do you use? I think that they all are good, and probably, you know, if you've got something in place that is working for your team, I wouldn't go try to reinvent the wheel. What I would recommend is whatever you're using or you're finding yourself having to use most frequently, whatever that is, you can go like to YouTube or wherever and find lots of quick tutorials about some functions. That's one thing that I did with Zoom because I was so new to it, and just kind of see, oh, here's this feature I didn't even know existed that can enhance your communication. So it's probably whatever you're most comfortable with and what's being used by the most folks that you're having to interact with. But honestly, I don't have one that I think is superior or better than another.
That's all great. So, Kara, are there any other questions, or Katie?
I don't believe I have any more. We're at 1:59, so I think we'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That information is so helpful. And I know, like you were talking about the emails and the going back and forth, that is one of my favorite things is don't hit reply all. Not everybody needs to say great, thanks, and hear that when you're talking to somebody else.
Really?
Yeah, that's a big one. The way we communicate right now is so important, and you have done a fabulous job in helping us understand that. So thank you so much. If anyone does have questions for them later, their information will be available on this recorded Zoom call. And are you going to be making this presentation available to us via PowerPoint possibly? Or
Kara?
I think what we usually do is we just keep the ones that are on the screen, but not actually.
Okay.
If there's any resources
Awesome.
or anything that you guys would like, we could send those to you
Awesome.
for some links. but not.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you. So again, we'd like to thank you both for all of your time and effort for this communication session. And again, this recording will be available for viewing, and I'm trying to look in the camera while I'm reading this. Will be available for viewing in our Business at its Best library, accessible through the partnership login portal. We hope that you will join us for next time, the next Business at its Best on May 21st with Crowd South, Sublime Media Group, and Youve and Company, talking about social media mini masterclass. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day, and enjoy the sunshine and warmth.